It ended up being about 45, 50 hits that I took that first day of DMT. I was in a place that if I didn't find any answers, I was going to walk off into the woods and not come back. My future self came and interacted with myself. And not me as an older man. This was a non-physical energy or, imprint of my soul or spirit. And it instantly conveyed that I'm just coming in to make sure everything's kind of good. And it really was so comforting. Wow. And was that just me, Adam Butler, with all of my trauma and all of my experiences coming up with me hallucinating? Is it possible that actually happened, that I did go into this elevated, hyperspace of DMT and I actually had this interaction with myself? What I take back is it had life-changing, life-saving effects on me, my perspective, my interactions with others, how I navigate myself in the world. Do I want to live and wake up happy, or do I want to get up and go off into the woods?
Adam Butler is a true psychonaut. He smoked DMT over 100 times, but not recreationally, therapeutically. He went from suicidal alcoholic to sober, clear, and on a mission, all through a molecule your own brain already produces. He's been to the mysterious Monroe Institute, participated in the same consciousness program the CIA classified during the Cold War, and has probably experienced more DMT entities than anyone alive. He is not our typical neuroscientist, but his story is powerful and human. He has so much to share that science simply has no answers for.
I basically got kicked out of the club, and I got my ass booted out of that room so fast. Over the next, say, month and a half, I tried it again, like maybe 2 or 3 times in sync. So I'd lay there and just nothing, like crickets.
Just pure pharmacology. There's just absolutely zero explanation for how that could be possible. How you can consume a large amount of the substance, but literally experience nothing.
This adds even more weirdness. So I did like an extra special, I'm sorry ceremony, truly, I went with my head down, asked for forgiveness. I went in that next session and I was back in, and I remember
Adam Butler, for people unfamiliar with you and your work, what do you think is the most important context for them to understand who I'm speaking to today, who you are and what your mission is?
My mission, very simply, is to help people that are in the same dark place that I used to be, as far as my mental health issues, find that inner light. And I guess what I really bring to the table, and we were just discussing this about how honored I am to sit in the seat after truly giants that have sat before you, is that what I can really bring is honesty, authenticity to this story in a raw way, where because I've lost everything and because I've had everything completely taken away from me, there's nothing else that I can really lose. So because of that, I'm really just comfortable sharing the truth of what goes on, in the psychedelic scenes, and I'm really happy to share that.
Well, the reason I was so interested in speaking with you is, I think a lot of people are understanding that modern materialistic ideas for consciousness and psychedelics just don't explain the weirdness and the radical stuff that we're seeing. It's just academics of, I love the speakers that I've spoken to. I think they're incredible. But this idea of getting a participant to take a psychedelic and sticking them in an MRI and thinking that you're going to solve everything from that sort of paradigm is limited. And I think we have to understand the limitations of that, which is why I really wanted to speak to you, as had some of the most intense and insane experiences that I've ever read about, because I care about experience. I really care about phenomenology. I care about subjective experience. It's been one of the things that's fascinated me for the last, 6 to 12 months. And yeah, I'm really, really excited to talk to you about your subjective experience on some of these trips, the realizations that you've had, the impact that it's had on you. Where do you want to go from there?
I say we start with the common thread that we discussed before recording about how this is such a way greater picture than just one man in my psychedelic trips. And I guess probably the prudent thing to do before we dive too much further is to have that disclaimer. In my opinion, psychedelics are not for everybody. DMT is definitely not for everybody. And to your point, it's not some magic pill where you just take it and you're all good. What I'm actually trying to share is probably counterintuitive to why you may have had me on. I know that there are multiple other modalities to basically have the same outcome that I had, this epiphany that I had of self-knowledge and self-love, and then this desire to kind of share that message can happen in many other ways. So that's why I explored not only psychedelics in such a deep way, but also other modalities, like I mentioned, the Monroe Institute, where I spent the week there on that campus exploring the Hemi-Sync technology to compare and contrast that to psychedelic states. I recently got back from a darkness retreat where it was a 6-day retreat where it ended up being 5 days, 100 plus hours of pitch blackness, which ended up being highly psychedelic. And again, I did that to compare and contrast the similarities with the intent of not having some psychedelic, light show or not just going out and interacting with DMT entities. And I've done all of that and they're fun. And I'm sure we'll get into those conversations, but it really was about self-exploration and about reducing the noise, getting rid of the outside stuff and really being able to turn within. And I think in society right now, that's a big problem where people are running from not even just even the negative issues, but even just some of the positive aspects of themselves. And a lot of people are just covering it with alcohol or, prescription pills or just not taking the time to themselves. So I preface all of that with everything that I'm going to say about how I changed the perspectives in my life and how I've really been able to tap into my inner light and source and really hopefully and doing a good job of sharing that message is that it's not just psychedelics. It's not just DMT. It's not just go have some shroom tea. It's really just know that you're worthy to take the time for yourself. And that may be a yoga class, that may be fishing, that may be whatever it may be, but that's the beginning step of all of this. And then if we can all get to that same proverbial mountaintop of like, oh yeah, why are we hoarding resources and fighting with one another and bringing people down? That's the big overall message. And for a lot of people, psychedelics is what kind of shakes that plaque out or it really makes them do that inner reflections, which then leads to further exploration. So yeah, not the magic pill, but typically the catalyst that sets that off.
Well said, man. Well said. Why not bring us back to one of those particularly resonant experiences that you've had in your life that's really just thrown you into a trajectory that you never would have guessed, that's put you on the mission that you're on now?
So my life is really clearly distinct before psychedelics and after psychedelics. And without necessarily getting into all of my backdrop, I can kind of bullet point some of the highlights. So I'm 45 years old and I'm 5.5 years sober from alcohol. So that was a big part of my journey, which was getting alcohol out of my system. And not that alcohol is necessarily the issue in itself. Like most things, it's your relationship to it. So I had a highly negative and addictive relationship with alcohol. I was a belligerent, narcissistic asshole who really ruined everything in my life, including multiple relationships. So I knew something kind of had to shake up. So at 40 years old, and again, a lot of things happened in my life to put me in a highly depressed, truly suicidal state. And that's when I knew that I needed to start doing something. And I knew it wasn't go to prescription pills and go to a doctor just to zombie me up with pills, that I needed to really handle my internal shit. So I started with several months going pretty deep with psilocybin shrooms, really. And that was the dark night of my soul, so to speak. That's when I really did the inner journey, the confronting my demons, naming the demons, hugging them, befriending them, kind of taking accountability for all the crap that had gone on in my life. But at that point, it was really just highlighting what an asshole I had been and like, wow, what a really deep pit I'm in. So I say all that because I mentioned how DMT saved my life and it really did. And how, there was that pivotal day where things really did change. But I would not have had that day if it wasn't for the 3 months leading up to it of the intense inner work that I did with shrooms. But I guess, to answer your question, that day that really kind of changed the trajectory of my life and truly saved my life and gave me the desire to live again was the first day that I was introduced to DMT. And that's a story that I tell often, that first day, because there's several bullet points of it that I think are really relevant to people that haven't tried DMT yet and maybe what the experience is like. But then ultimately, again, to answer your question, what led to that like, oh shit, epiphany moment where I can say I wanted to live again? And I was really in that darkest of the funk. And that really was, and it's going to sound very like Ram Dass basic, like be here now. But in essence, I had for several years, everything in my life had collapsed and blown up and lost jobs and lost houses and lost relationships. So I was really in turmoil, about the past and all the crap that I had done. But at that point too, and I can get into the story, I had just lost my job. I had just threatened to kill a man, and I'm sitting there in a pretty shitty place myself, and so I'm all stressed out about the future. And what am I going to do about the future? And really, it was not worrying about the past or the future, being here now, not trying to connect all the proverbial dots in my life. It really was kind of enjoy the space between the dots, enjoy the quiet between the beats, so to speak. And in my deepest of my last trip of that day, basically all the proverbial dots that were rattling around in my head got connected. And then, those blew up, and then 1,000 more dots, and then those blew up, and then 1,000,000 dots. And there was this kind of inner voice or download of information that was, hey, you stupid human, the point isn't to try to connect all the dots in your life. It's really just to enjoy this very second. And that was the day that I really realized, all right, I found out all the crap in my life. I'm taking accountability for it. And now what are you going to do? You can't be in this paralyzed state of fear and anxiety, and really just move forward here right now. And that was, 4 years ago. And from that moment, I've felt as though that was my second coming of life, so to speak. And I've taken every breath with gratitude and appreciation. And since then, I've traveled the world. I've written multiple books. I've gone to all these cool retreats and, meditation sessions. And through all of that, and I mentioned right before recording how finally, just in the past few weeks, coming back from a 9-day psychedelic retreat where we were really helping and serving people, now I've put kind of my life into context where I kind of have figured out what my future is and what I'm going to do with it. And it really is trying to stop that rattling around in other people's brains. And again, to your point, I don't have the answer. Any doctor doesn't have the answer. These plant medicines or psychedelics aren't a magic pill, but it's when that person takes the time to actually look within themselves, to have that true, honest dialogue, that people can start healing themselves and then start enjoying themselves and truly, having a good sense of self. So long-winded answer to, there was that day that I just said, I finally realized that I got a message from source that, the point isn't to figure all this shit out. It's really just to live.
MindLab Pro is a scientifically backed nootropic designed to enhance memory and focus and keep you as mentally sharp as possible in 2026. And before you click off, it has been scientifically proven in not one, but 3 separate double-blind placebo-controlled trials that it really works. In one study, healthy adults took MindLab Pro for 30 days and improved on 3 separate information processing tasks. In another trial, adults improved on a set of memory tasks. The interesting part is in both trials, this improvement did not happen in the placebo group, which is a really strong piece of evidence that what is making the difference is in this bottle. MindLab Pro has no proprietary blends, complete transparency on ingredients, and has full third-party testing so you know exactly what's in the bottle. Performance Labs is one of the most scientifically rigorous supplement companies that exists, and that is the exact reason that I have decided to partner with them. I also take their sleep stack every single night, and they sell a bunch of other high quality supplements. They offer a 30-day money back guarantee, so there's literally zero risk in trying them out. You're supporting the giant shoulder by using the link in the description. Now back to the episode.
Thank you for sharing that, man. I'm sure that's difficult, to recall even now, even if you have repeated it a few times. I'm sure it's always difficult. You can sense the emotion in your voice and the passion that you speak. So I appreciate you sharing it. Can you talk about the experience itself? Because, we use all these rich metaphors and analogies for talking about like connecting the dots and figuring this out. But how do you bring that back to like the raw experience of your consciousness in that moment, or what you can actually recall of it? Because I understand that it was 4 years ago. Were you communicating with something that you think of as other? Were you talking to yourself? Were you having a rich visual experience? Were you having a hallucination experience? Like what was in the spotlights of your consciousness in that moment?
So really good question, because all of those things are different interactions that do happen in the DMT space. So, you can't just pile everything into it. And I guess maybe if I could, before leaning into that question, because I know your desire is to kind of pull apart the experience and to kind of see where I think maybe your audience as well as you can pull it apart. So, if I could, before I get to how that happened, I want to lead up to that, because that first day that I was introduced to it, I think is important, because when I say DMT saved my life and it happened on that first day, it was after spending about an hour and a half with the molecule, and I went through about 7 or 8 sessions, and each session was multiple hits. So it ended up being about 45, 50 hits that I took that first day of DMT. Now, anybody that hears or, references DMT, normally it's that kind of Terrence McKenna quote of, take your 3 or 4 big hits, take the last one as long as you can. And so I pushed that way, way beyond what most people would do. I mean, I really saturated my body that day. But again, I was in a place that if I didn't find any answers, I was going to walk off into the woods and not come back. So, and like most people, literally everybody that I've spoken with, DMT finds you when you need it, and it kind of falls in your lap, and the universe kind of puts it in front of you. And that's what happened to me, where I had a friend of mine who knew really how shitty of a place I was in, who offered it to me and said, listen, I'll sit with you. I'll give you, I'll give you as much as you need. And that this very well may help. So, I went into that day really with the intent of, I've got to figure out some sort of answer. I wasn't going there, again, just for sights and sounds and for the psychedelic light show. I was trying to truly converse with some sort of, higher being. But I think it's important to explain kind of my first session, and then the middle ones are kind of all relative progressions, and then that last one. But that first session, I think, is really important, because one of the things that attracted me to the molecule, as well as I believe why Strassman did his, study in the 90s, and which is why it's also getting a lot of attention now, is the fact that it is endogenous. So it is produced naturally in our own body. It is metabolized very easily and quickly. So when you're smoking it, it only lasts 10 minutes or less. And that fact that it's endogenous, you read about it, but until you actually ingest it, it was very clear that the very first taste, so the very first puff that I took, as much as your sensations really start vibrating and humming and being accelerated pretty instantly, it did feel natural. It felt innate. It felt very comfortable. It didn't feel like poisoning, like shrooms kicking on or LSD coming on. It really felt as though the veil was being kind of removed. Not that I was being drugged up or that my senses were being altered. It felt like they were being enhanced. But also with that first session, I took, 3 smaller hits. Didn't have a breakthrough, didn't have an entity interaction. But there was this very distinct nasal drip and this taste in the back of my throat that I remembered from my youth, and I don't recall exactly the age, but I felt like I was like, 10 or 12 years old. And I remember being in my friend's grandparents' basement hallway to the stairway to their basement. I know it sounds random, but I don't know, maybe if it was acacia wood or if there was wood in the like something was that smell. And I just instantly got transported back to, oh shit, this is really familiar. So that first session, it was really just, oh wow, this is actually very comforting. My body as a vessel can handle it. And I kind of got comfortable again, how my body would interact with this. But I wasn't there just looking to feel good. I needed some sort of answer. So came back, kind of took a couple of minutes to chill and then pushed a little bit further. Well, this is, all the sights and sounds are happening, and, you're getting the Alex Gray spinning mandalas that are morphing, and, you go from just looking at things to now you're in the middle of this like expansive peripheral view. And it was really fun and cool. But again, not why I was there. I was in a highly depressed, suicidal state. And it was like, I'm here for therapeutic reasons. I've got to figure some shit out. So I pushed it. And I was having a great experience. But again, I wasn't getting any answer. And it was that 7th or 8th session, again, an hour and a half into it. And before every session, I always was pleading and giving my intention and going into it with gratitude. But that last session, it really was full on, like pleading with the universe, like, please. And I didn't know what type of answer was it. So to your point in your question, is an entity going to come talk to me? Is a machine elf going to talk to me? Is some insectoid mantis guy going to talk to me? Is some beautiful woman going to talk to me? Am I going to get a DNA download? And like all the shit that people had talked about, I was looking for one of those things because I needed one of those things. And that last session, I took as many hits as I could. And it was 6 or 7, and I had a vape pen that you could just hit the button and hit it. And I had like the crucible that you could put the crystals in. So I didn't have to light a lighter. So that's why I was able to really go deep with it. And that last session, everything, it was completely different than the other 7 sessions. Everything stopped. All the vibratory hum stopped. All the sights and sounds stopped. And I was just in this black suspended space. So I wasn't, falling into an abyss. I wasn't shooting through a spinning portal. I was just clear in blackness and nothing was there. And what conveyed to me, so to your point, it wasn't a figure, it wasn't an entity, it wasn't some booming male voice. And again, I've had all of those. This was truly just a conveyance of information, an instant download, an instant software upload. And I reference that because I want to reference a hardware upload that I had after that, which was fucked, excuse my language, but that was a scary one. But it really was just this instant, and everybody's going to have their own subjective dots in their life, from loss to relationships to when you were, hurt as a kid, all of that crap. And it really was just like boom connected, and then expansive boom connected, and then and even beyond my own this physical reincarnation, like it was even beyond that. And so what was that? Again, as an author, I try to use colorful language to describe how that was, but in essence, it was an instantaneous kind of like Gnostic knowing of all of the most profound inner questions that I had. Like all the scars and wounds of my psyche were instantly not even healed. It was more just, you don't have to heal them. Just, this is what they are. This is part of your story and narrative. This is part of the dot, and again, if you're composing music, you're not just compressing everything and trying to connect it all. You need the space, you need the distance, and you need the time between it. And really, I guess my life got put into that perspective of the past and the future, really just not needing to necessarily make sense, but just truly be here now. And I came out of that experience really in a crumpled, crying mess, just full of gratitude, tears coming out of my eyes, and just I had now the desire to live and move forward. So with the inner work that I had done with the shrooms, where I took accountability, I stopped looking for external solutions to my internal issues, and I stopped blaming other people for all of my faults and flaws. But now I had the light shined on, oh yeah, like now you're in control of your life and move forward. And honestly, since then, I don't have the material wealth that I used to. So part of my story was I had multiple high paying jobs. I've owned 15 homes in my life. I had all the women in the fancy cars and all of that crap. I don't have any of that anymore, but I'm so happy and so content in my own skin. I wake up every day, excited to live. I go to every night, full of, again, gratitude and goosebumps truly of how excited I am to be who I am. But because of this, I've literally made such great inner circle friends of these spiritual people and people that have invited me into their home to share in loves and hugs. And it's not, and it sounds kind of, some of it is kumbaya, like this woo-woo crap. But man, I tell you, that's what the world needs, is people having honest, authentic, transparent conversations where everybody is there with the intent to help. And again, psychedelics are not. That's really the big picture. Psychedelics help me, and it helps a group of maybe vets with PTSD, or maybe it helps with people that have, I've been off on a tangent here, but I've been really leaning into IFS work. So internal family systems, that work where basically people are understanding the different parts of their psyche and their ego. And it's not, shut up and go away. A lot of these parts are their survivor parts. It's what, if a little kid was abused and molested, and then they blanked out 10 years of their life because that's what, kept them to survive. You start doing psychedelics and you start breaking into that part that was, suppressed, and you can start peeling back these layers. So for some people, psychedelics really, you need that not necessarily violent shake, but that really extreme shake. But for others, it really is just, take a look within and stop being your own worst enemy, your own self-limiter, and get the hell out of your own way. But that was the day I had a purpose again to live. And it seems now it is literally 4 days after that kind of experience, it's only gotten bigger, brighter, better, and more beautiful. Still with the kicks in the junk. Still, you still got problems, and I still get pissed off. It's not like I'm some enlightened soul that's figured it all out.
Right.
But I'm not a drunk asshole banging my head against the wall, blaming other people for my problems, which is, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people are doing right now.
I'm thrilled to hear that you just wake up excited to live, man. That's just, it's such a beautiful thing to hear. I wake up every day excited to live and excited to do my job, and truly blessed and grateful. And, if these conversations do help even a percentage point of people that have that experience, I just think that that's worth all the weight in gold. But man, that's such a powerful story. It's almost hard to know even how to follow up. I am super curious about, the quantity of DMT that you took. DMT is a super interesting psychedelic for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that you don't develop tolerance. So there's a particular pharmacological property of DMT is that it doesn't stay sat in the receptor. Like LSD it's why it lasts 12 hours. It's a particularly snug fit between it and the HT2A receptor, and it just kind of sits in there. It's a really nice, cozy fit. DMT doesn't. It's like incredibly fast action, but then you can just keep taking it. And I'm curious, do you know of any research that's been done on like the types of dosage that you took that day and what effect you're having on your HT2A receptors there on your 45th take of the substance? Like, how does that differ from the 10th to the 15th to the 20th in terms of receptor saturation? How does that change the shift in subjective experience? I'm never recommending that someone do that because, that seems insane. But like, is there a way that you could have a protocol where you almost force it because you just keep going? I don't know. But do you know of any research that's been done at really high doses? I presume that stuff is really hard to get ethical clearance on.
Me, I'm doing the research. No, these are the exact questions though that need to be answered. So I can share my experience. That day, and as much as of a depressed, anxious, and it's self-admittedly not stable mental state. Again, I was in a tough spot. I never once felt like physiologically that my body was in fear or that my heart was over racing or that, I was in fear that my body couldn't take this. So just from a physiological metabolic standpoint, it really did feel comfortable. And every time I came out, I wasn't foggy. I came back to full lucidity, if anything, more clarity, not less. So just that first day, I always felt comfortable. Now, after using it hundreds of times, I can also say that I have full comfort. I've never felt awkward or weird taking it. But there has been multiple times where I'll take and so your question about dosage, I don't ever like weigh out what I'm going to take and measure it. How I would typically word it is that if I'm putting it, so there's two ways that I typically, ingest DMT is in a vape cartridge. So you can just take the straight crystals, put them in a vape cartridge. Typically I don't cut it with any oil. So you go in with a crystal, and then you can heat it with like a hair dryer, and it just like a candle would turn to waxy oil. So then you have a vape cartridge that you can take pure, molecule with. But then I also like to put it just in a regular cannabis pipe with a little bit of cannabis to act as a screen, and then you put the crystals on top. And I mentioned in my book where there is recipes, because I do want to share that it is very easy to make, and it is, in most cases, you can get the product shipped legally, that I put about three peppercorn size or BB size peppercorn, pieces. So whatever that would equate to, and maybe a strong session would be 4 to 5 peppercorn sizes. And really it's just, you roast it and take as big of a hit as you can, and you hold it for as long as you can. But I say that because I've had some of the most profound, deepest sessions with just one hit. And maybe not to make this into like a drug culture thing, but you can imagine just, so if you take 3 hits, all right, well, if you have a joint and you give a little, or, that's a hit. But you could take a 4-foot bong and, rip it and clear your whole lungs. So it really depends on what is your one hit of DMT. And you really can microdose it, and you can play and throttle that. And that's something that I want to, talk about as well. It's not just full blast, let's have the breakthrough and interact with the Jesters. You can really throttle it to use it creatively. You can use it intimately in a sexual sense. You can use it for your meditation. There's a lot there. But sometimes, just one big torch it, rip it, and do as big of a hit as you can will send you absolutely blasted off. And then there's several times where I've taken, 3 or 4 significant large pulls, and it's a relatively mild experience, relative, where you're just kind of sitting back and watching the show. But there is also been, and you mentioned it, I don't believe, I think it was Gallimore episode, where you were talking about this blackout stage. And I actually did have that happen to me.
This is so strange to me. This is one of those things
weird, dude.
There isn't modern science to explain how you can have a subjective experience that will just like block a chemical reaction. right? There's
Very
like
weird.
that's where I'm like, that's exactly where I asked that question to a neuroscientist, and I'm not convinced by their answer, when I think they should put up their hands a little bit more and be like, we have no explanation for that. How a jester can appear to you in your subjective experience and say, not today, buddy, and then the trip just ends. Like there's chemical reactions going on in the brain and body that are causing this mad hallucinatory experience, and then in that experience,
Yep, they just shut the door.
something door is shut, but then chemically it reverts back to normal. It's like that makes no sense. But I interrupted. Please talk about your blocking experience. But this is fascinating to me and makes utterly no sense.
Well, and then even to add a layer of that, where it's like, so, and I think one of the arguments about, is when you're, elevating your consciousness on DMT, are you entering some realm with truly conscious beings? And that's the conversation you had with Gallimore and I agree with that. I think we are expanding or increasing the sensitivity to our antenna. I think we are increasing, not only the five senses we have to a heightened and extreme level, but we're adding the ability to tap into multiple other innate senses, which allow us to have increased ability to take in that vibratory information. So I really do think there's a distinct realm in something outside there. I don't think this is all just, being created in our own subjective minds. But that time that I had the blackout, and I think what's interesting about it, because it kind of leads credence to this other sentient world. This was maybe about a year and a half after writing the DMT field guide. I had already been on a bunch of podcasts. The book's now sold in 12 countries, and it's going really well. Now, I just mentioned this whole experience of my dark night of the soul. So I am humble. I wasn't going around with cockiness or arrogance, but in all honesty, a year and a half into this journey, and now I've done DMT, say 100 times, and I was getting all this great information. I never stopped having respect or reverence, but the cockiness on my end changed a little bit, where I was like, well, I'm the psychonaut. I'm the DMT guy. I'm the guy that whatever,
Right.
like, I'm going into this is my, not to say like this is my realm, but with this, like, all right, I want to know how the pyramids were built. Bring me to the Akashic records. I want to know the fucking, the basis of human evolution. Like, all right, if I know how powerful this realm is, and it's infinite in its knowledge, and my body is this great vessel that can go in exploring, I went in there being like, all right, I want to, I'm going to ask for what I want. And man, that arrogance and that cockiness, like I basically got kicked out of the club, and I got my ass booted out of that room so fast. And it was just kind of like, it's horrible, right? So I come back, and it's like, all right, well, that sucked, but how could I have just smoked that much and not have anything? Not the vibratory hum, not the psych, nothing. But maybe it's a fluke. Well, over the next, say, month and a half, I tried it again, like maybe 2 or 3 times. And so I'd lay there, and I'd have any one of those modalities, and I don't recall which those 2 or 3 were, but whether it be ripping my pipe or the pen, I mean, again, I had been to this space hundreds of times. I know how to get there. I know my breakthrough dose. I know the levels of the hum. I know when it starts, getting high pitched, that cool 2 more and I'm fucking in. Well, I did all of that, and just nothing, like crickets, like full, like eyes open, not having to lay down, just like, how is this happening? And I'm blowing out smoke. So it's not like I'm, and that happened, like I said, all told, it was like 3 or 4 times over the course of about 2 months. And
it just makes no sense. And when you do that, do you enter the start of the experience and then have some, like, you're blocked, some, bouncer to the club, not tonight, buddy, like,
no, that was,
or is just nothing?
There was nothing, which is kind of the weird part. So normally, like, the first thing that happens is, like, the very first thing when you get in that DMT space is a vibratory hum. That's a visceral, vibratory, electric, just buzz, and you feel it and you hear it, and then that just highly, elevates in pitch, and then, which leads credence. And I have so many tangents I want to talk to you about symmetry that you talked about on one, and vibration, but yeah. So it was really none of that. It was just dead, like nothing, like no increase of vibration, no increase of sensitivity to my senses. It was just really like, oh, cool, I'm not even going there. And then I kind of realized, well, I'm trying to, again, how is this happening? Then I think, I something told me, like, yeah, well, you went in there with like a cocky human, like acting like just some tough guy. That's why. So, and again, this adds even more weirdness. So I did like an extra special, like, I'm sorry ceremony, like truly, like I went with my head down, asked for forgiveness, said, pretty much it won't happen again. I kind of, yeah, I asked for forgiveness, and then I went in that next session, and I was back in, and I remember the girlfriend that I was with at the time, I came back out, and I was just so excited. I was like, they let me back in. I was like, I'm back. I'm like, I got invited back in, and you laugh, but that was my spot. Like, I was so interested and involved in studying and researching DMT. I was planning on writing my writing career on it, and it was.
Right.
I was really concerned that I had fucked up bad and not going to be let back. And now, again, that's why every session I have now has just full reverence, full respect. I always ask, I don't ever ask for any specific information or can you tell me this? I'm always there saying thank you for what you've already given and shared, ultimate respect and reverence. And I feel like because of that, I'm continually led into it. And I've been having fantastic explorations for the last several years now.
I mean, I think strangely enough, that's probably one of the most interesting experiences to me as the neuroscience guy, as the psychedelics act at pyramidal cortical neurons and layer 5 of the cortex. Like, when I'm thinking of it from a purely, chemical pathway, chemical signaling cascade type pathway, just pure pharmacology, there's just absolutely zero explanation for how that could be possible. It doesn't. That framework that I learned in college and I thought was just the dominant one provides absolutely zero explanation for how that sort of blocking can happen, how you can consume a large amount of the substance but literally experience nothing. And it's not just you saying this, the listener might be at home like, well, how do we trust this guy? This is not just you saying this. I mean, Gallimore is a very respected neuroscientist and pharmacologist, and he's seen many, 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 many cases of this. And this just makes no sense. And it's why I wanted to speak to you, because clearly materialist pharmacologists and psychedelic researchers, we need to tackle this from multiple angles. But how do you think about this now? Like, what is your best explanation or best framework for this? Like, I know you going in cocky, you need to be humble to enter this, but like in the most grounded or ungrounded way, like, how do you think about this? Like, what's the model in your mind for what happened in those months where you were taking all these substances and just nothing was happening?
So I think it leads back to my kind of big philosophy, or kind of like how I'm trying to put all of this like together in a big picture, which, and again, psychedelics can be one modality, and there's all these other modalities of self exploration. But I think what's happening, again, we have our 5 normal senses, and to say that we have that range of say 1 to 10. Well, under psychedelic states, or any of these elevated states of consciousness, we can dial them up to say 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. But then again, adding these other modalities, whether it be like telepathy. So there's a podcast in the US called the Telepathy tapes, where it's nonverbal autistic children that are communicating, like literally talking complex like conversations across distances and time and space. And it seems to be clearly happening. Again, I reference Monroe Institute, where they do remote viewing and binaural beats to kind of elevate yourself. Like, these things are clearly happening. That there was a government program that put millions of dollars into this program with really significant results.
I am a little bit skeptical of telepathy tapes. I want to push it because I want this to be a healthy, and I'll definitely push back on things that I'm skeptical on, right? Because I think that's also critical for this conversation, right?
Oh, sure.
I'm still skeptical on telepathy tapes, and I just don't think it necessarily communicates what people take from it. But nevertheless, it's interesting, and I think the interest in what they're doing is warranted and granted and cool and interesting. But I'm a little bit skeptical on exactly the takeaway.
Fair. But now, and that's why I appreciate your podcast and what you bring to it, is because I don't think anybody necessarily knows what is going on. And the host of that says kind of she doesn't know what's going on. And then there is also a part of it about like marketability that so you do have to not sell a story, but and maybe another tangent here relevant to DMT, but is like the DMT laser experiment that gentleman, right, Danny Goller is putting on.
I wanted to get to it, Adam. I have it down on the paper for sure. I wanted to get to it.
Cool. So without getting into that, sorry, I think it's similar where it's like, yes, there are some aspects of it where if you just pull apart some of the highlights or the snippets that people could kind of jump on and be like, yeah, he's really saying he found the code of reality. No, if you actually listen to the depth of what he's saying, it's way more depth, more complex than that, and way more humble. I mentioned the telepathy tapes because I think what that's showing is or what I was referencing is because it does, I think, express a cognitive ability that goes beyond what we know in science, and that there is communication, and even just in other mammals and animals. Clearly, there's increased sensitivity in sight, hearing, spatial awareness, all of that mammals and biological bodies, can possess. So I think what's happening when we're getting into these elevated states is we're able to, again, elevate the normal 5 that we know, kind of unpack and unlock these other extrasensory ones. And I think it's not just 1 or 2. I think it's like dozens and dozens. Like, us humans in our most primal sense can really be this divine energy. So I think what's happening is when we're using DMT is kind of like this cheat code, and we're basically getting right to that vibratory state, and when we're tweaking all of our senses to be highly sensitive, and removing that reducing valve, all this Huxley, where now we're letting more things in. I think what's happening is whatever entities or whatever system is in control of that, they're clearly more energetic. They're more vibratorily dense. They have a greater bandwidth of energy, or it's just a higher level. And whether you dumb it down and say, well, they're 5D and we're 3D, whatever it may be, I just think they have the ability to maybe like a radar jammer, where we're just these slow vibrating humans in our 3D meat suits, and they're in control of, do we have access to that? So I mean, I feel like they can shut off the signal coming from the satellite, or they can, again, like a radar jammer, just shut that off. It sounds weird even explaining it and coming out of my mouth, but to your point, how else do you explain that neurochemistry wise, or how do you explain it where
there is
hundreds of times, and then now after hundreds of times,
it is a neurochemistry explanation. Like, I totally agree. That's why you can't really be dismissive of anything. Like neurochemistry does not provide anything there. I don't think, at least to my knowledge, I don't understand what the neurochemistry explanation would be, other than countless people being somehow wrong about their own experience. And I tend to trust people's counting of their experience in general.
And it's weird that had to do with kind of like my arrogance or cockiness, or my like they were teaching me a lesson. So I'd be curious to know like what the data points are, like when people got kicked out. Was it similar, like, they were doing it in unsavory ways, or they were doing it to manipulate people, or they were doing it, I don't know. I'd be curious.
I would love, I think I asked Andrew Gallimore about this. The problem is just like the amount of research that needs to be done in psychedelics, it probably outnumbers the amount of total funding by several orders of magnitude. Unfortunately, most of the questions that I ask, where I'm like, oh, this experiment, like, tell me this has been done, this has to have been done. And the answer is always like, no, that's like way down the list. We haven't even barely scratched the surface. So just way more needs to be done.
Even, Gallimore was saying there's so much low-hanging fruit. Like, even just some of the stuff that he's doing, like where it's like in a darkness retreat, are you getting increased endogenous DMT? So I love DMT, I love endogenous DMT, and I've been in a darkness retreat. All of those, like, yes, and yes. And if not Gallimore and his crew of people with his access and clout to have access to the labs, and he's saying it's not done, and why not? This is low-hanging fruit. Exactly to your point. It's like there's just so much out there for whether it be PhD students or private labs, but that's, and not, it's not just throw money at it and that's the that'll solve it. But yes, part of the issue is we need more funding and more people that have deep pockets to step up and answer these questions. Like, that's a very interesting find, and I'll happily donate my body for any darkness retreat or any saturation of DMT. Just putting that out there.
And I want to build the giant shoulder to be in a position to be able to fund and run that sort of research in the future. We're not there yet, but 100%, I would commit so much to that. I think it's so important. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things that I want to tackle, and I want to try and do it in an order that makes sense for the listener, because it's very jumbly and weird. So let's go to and there is no real, I'm not trying to do it in a linear way, but
No,
there's
I
a sort
get
of
it.
maybe a remotely linear way that we can do this. And I want to go to entities next, because you talk about they a lot, and a bit of jesters and blocking and signal jamming. What do you think a DMT entity is, with your 100+ trips? The listener at home, assume they haven't taken DMT. Like, what is this when people say DMT entity? What does that really mean?
So another term that people use often is like DMT realm, or they're going into this DMT space. So I think, again, that is what's happening. So when you're ingesting DMT, you're instantly getting this vibratory hum. You're instantly feeling all of your senses increase, and it's not.
Can you explain? Sorry, what vibratory hum? Can you explain what that word means?
Sure. So it sounds like, if he was sitting next to just like a bass drum that's constantly just with a tonality, or if he was sitting next to like an electrical grid where you can actually feel the electricity buzzing, and it, like that literally just, so you can hear it, but it's a visceral shaking at a, and not like a hot heartbeat rate, as my New England accent, excuse me, but truly like just a, and you're feeling it. And it really, again, it's a sound, but it's also internally, viscerally, where your muscles are kind of going into this, I don't want to say like a tetanus like twitch. It's even quicker than that. And it's as you're ascending up those levels, in your podcast with Andres Emilius was talking about like the 6 stages, and it is kind of like you're dialing that up and ratcheting it up. So it is from like, and then once once you're really there, you're humming, and every stage, and I kind of, I agreed with his stages. I was nodding my head as he was going through it, and I think that they did a really good job of explaining it like that. And it's not that one stage is better or worse than the other, or the point is always to get to that highest stage or breakthrough. Each one, there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and each one, there's beauty to kind of hover in that space. And that's what I've learned recently, is it's not, let's always do this blast off and ascend into this craziness. There are levels there. So to answer your point, I think what's happening is, as the human vessel is increasing its sensitivity, it's adding those extra sensory abilities to increase the bandwidth of information that it's getting. You do get to a point where it's not that you stop being this 3D human here in this space and you become like this ethereal being in this 5D space, but there is a very distinct change from, hey, I'm seeing some trippy shit in my environment, to, wow, my consciousness is now in a completely different realm in space. And that's kind of, in my understanding, is one of the main reasons why they're doing that DMTX extended state research, is because they really are trying to, and they say it as such, they're trying to map, like in a geological sense, that DMT hyperspace, because people are coming back with the same conversation about like crystalline structured buildings and colors of purple and gold and serpent-like snake interactions, and all of this very, very familial things are happening. So I think is what's happening is, we innately as humans have the ability to tap into this realm, whether it be through prayer, meditation, endogenous DMT, or like what I've been doing is just smoking DMT straight up. So you blast up, you get into this vibratory space that allows you to be in this realm. That realm is populated with DMT entities, and you've had guests on, Gallimore included. A friend of mine, Sarah Finn, which actually she may be an interesting guest. She's the illustrator that worked with David J. Brown, who did that book, The DMT Entities. So it's beautiful. It's this,
Very cool.
basically a portfolio of the most common entities that they say populate those places. So they have the Jesters, they have the beautiful lady in white, they have all, and then with,
I learned about recently.
yeah, actually, I'll share a little bit of her work with you when we get off. But I think what's happening is, again, we're able to get into that space, and then from there, it is populated with sentient beings that are non-corporeal, non-physical, that can interact not only verbally. So I've had the interaction where it is like, male voices just talking back and forth, to the telepathic communications where it's just a download of information or a conveyance of information. But then I've also had an interaction where I felt as though like I was not, well, I was kind of restricted against my will. And again, all the other ones were software upgrades, and I felt as though I had like a hardware upgrade. But before we get to that one, to answer your question further, I would say 1 out of 10 maybe of my interactions or my sessions of DMT have entity interaction. So it's not every time. It's not even 50-50. So like when they do happen, I'm always like, yes, this is awesome. It's grateful. And everybody's experience is going to be unique and subjective, but I think there is some overall like feelings or like an ambiance to the entities that are common. So like when people say like the jesters or the elves, my interaction when I use those is that typically it's not one, it's many. So it's a group of them. Typically they are smaller in stature. Typically they are like with a happy, jovial, like happy to see you, like come, like welcoming you in. Many times that's associated with like a carnival, like truly like an amusement park setting where there's colors and spinning rides, and they're trying to show you around, and they're introducing you to their friends, like you're the cool like cousin that they want to like show off. And a lot of times it's great. Like one times I was pretty heavy on shrooms, and I decided to go deep with DMT, and that's something I'm exploring too, is combining DMT with a lot of these other psychedelics. And those jesters were like, Adam's back. He's back. And he brought shrooms. So like they were happy that like they knew my consciousness was this fun thing to explore. And I was already this sparkly iridescent light, and they were like, yeah, he's even more sparkly. So like that's the gestury, like cool.
Can you describe them visually a bit more? Like I really want the listener to maybe have an idea in their mind visually. What do they look like? Colors, shapes. Do you get a sense of what they're made out of? Does that question even make sense?
Yes, and you know it's tough because I think this is where it's probably, and some people would say like, is this just because in today's culture, people are talking about elves and we're seeing it in movies, but I'm gonna be like, no, like I'm not seeing them as like gnome like with eyes and noses, but I'm not seeing them as even mechanical elves or robots. They're almost just really like moving swirls of energy and color, and like they're distinct. They have their own form, but it's constantly moving and morphing, and like it's not just like a still being. How I'm experiencing them, and because of that, they almost move like a flock of fish. Again, in a group where they're always just like moving and morphing. So it's like. Maybe I'm too old. I'm going to be dating myself, but there's a movie called The Labyrinth back in the day with David Bowie. It's like a cult classic, but like there's in one of the pits, like all these hands and like are coming out, and it's kind of like that mentality where it's like this, they're one of a group. But what I could say, they're typically multicolored, and there's a lot of moving and morphing of colors, like crystal-like type stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't describe them as like little people or elves.
And do you relate with what Andres talked about with the greater and greater symmetries and the folds and the entities, kind of as you would escalate the dose, they would shift from 3-fold symmetries to 4-fold, 5-fold, like they would become more symmetrical, they would have more folds, they would have more dimensions to them. Do you relate to that?
How I would answer that would be, if you're interacting with the entities, so that would be the jesters, the elves. I would say that the mantis would fit into that. Like I've had the interactions with like the beautiful woman, like with the white kind of dress energy. I've had the interactions with like the wise old man kind of like coming into to share knowledge. I would say like if you're in that, to use his kind of stages, if you're in whatever stage that is where you're interacting with those entities, my interaction with them anyway is that's all on a similar plane. So you're kind of at this. You're still conscious enough to have these kind of one-on-one interactions. Like you're still like, hey, I'm Adam in DMT state and I'm interacting with this DMT entity. When you blast off to that full, like you have no control and it goes in, beyond the entity interaction, that's when the symmetry and the geometry and it goes from whatever the 5D, 6D, 10D, whatever it is. And that's a whole different experience. And that's the big mind fuck. And I know we're jumping around a little bit, but that's where the conversations that you've been having with other people about symmetry and about electricity and about, phase shifts and about just simple spinning. Like when that guy was saying about like the ATP synthase spins, I think at like 500 revolutions per second.
Nick Lane,
It's like,
yeah.
what the fuck? Like, so like, it's like you're seeing that, like you're seeing the entire universe at the same time you're seeing it at the scale of like an ATP synthase, and you're seeing it spin at that level, and you're in it, and it's like, and then maybe that's a weird way of kind of describing it, but like that's the type of hyper dimensionality that you see. But when I'm in that space, there's no interaction with entities. You're just kind of like along for the ride.
When I asked Robin Carhart-Harris about this, who's probably, one of the most prolific psychedelic researchers today, publishing most papers, has a lot of reputation in the field. When I asked him about DMT entities, he gave me an answer that I was sort of unsatisfied with. An incredibly intelligent guy. And again, absolutely, without a doubt, probably the number one psychedelic scientist at the moment in terms of just outright credentials. But he said it's sort of like what he attributes it to is, these deep shared cultural stereotypes, these union archetypes that are sort of deeply ingrained in our subconscious through story over, many hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years, whatever time frame. And I'm like, maybe that's part of the equation. I don't know how much. Maybe it's part of it. I think without a doubt, in the shared hallucination, shared experience, there is a very large expectation effect. People are expecting to have an experience. And if we think about the brain primarily as this generative, predictive reality machine, and psychedelics are ramping all of that up, without a doubt, your expectation and your belief and wanting to be a part of the crowd that also saw the DMT entity or also saw the thing that you saw in the documentary. I think all of that is going to be part of the equation. I think there's an interesting conversation on how much of that is what's going on. How much do you think is shared cultural experiences, sort of deep union archetypes, and how much of it is got more Gallimore style alien world building, completely different, not rooted in anything that we would say is our modern culture or shared subconscious? How do you parse those apart? What do you think about how they contribute to the overall effect?
I think I can maybe bring them together as opposed to separate them. And ultimately, again, that's what I'm trying to do is to try to look at it from a bigger picture and maybe see where the commonality is. So I agree with the fact that there is some cultural and time, time essence as far as the words that we use. So yes, the nomenclature is going to sound similar. And if the machine elves resonate and we know that that's what people are going to get, just how humans in our language progresses, I understand how that's going to come into play. Just like if you read like, Diana Pasulka's work where she's going back about studying like religious angels and tying them to like current aliens. And they're really describing very similar things. I'm a big history buff as far as like Roman and Greek history and their culture. They're using stories in descriptive ways that are describing very similar interactions with entities. And a lot of times was actually on drugs. So yes, there is a cultural timestamp and fingerprint on the terms in words that we use. Absolutely. But I think we need to separate that from the actual experience themselves. Like I can tell you, and my job isn't to try to convince anybody, and I could give a shit if you believe me or not you, but like literally the world in general. What I'm seeing in these experiences is timeless and ancient and has nothing to do with anything that I've read, seen, or any movie. And maybe that's actually one of the things that is really not necessarily confusing to me, but again, the question that you ask in many, and not to keep referencing Gallimore, but his kind of question too is, how what survival mechanism or what in our evolution, like why would we ever be able to construct these worlds like this? Like what in our past even is able to put these things together? And I'm very comfortable in my cognitive ability. I am very comfortable in my creative ability. Like I'm very like, without on the level of being conceited or cocky, like I can talk about how great my brain is all day. Like, cool. I'm comfortable with that with full humility. there's no freaking way I could come up with 1/10% of the complexity and the mathematical precision and complexity of geometry and understanding of physics that I see in this DMT space. There's just no way my puny little Adam Butler brain of 45 years old living here in New England could possibly construct the beauty and complexity and precision of what happens in that DMT space. So it is just beyond my ability to do that on my own. So that's what gives me full confidence that it is not just my brain producing this, because it's just, I've got nothing in my training or whatever. So
I
to
guess
separate it, like,
I guess the pushback on that might be, you know, you're talking about your conscious experience there, and sort of what Robin is searching for is the subconscious. You know, we don't have by definition access to this subconscious. This is all the underwiring that is only 1% of it gets funneled up to our conscious awareness. So I guess the pushback on that might be, how could you be confident that your subconscious isn't capable of all of this craziness when all we have access is the lamp on the tiny amount of land in the dark that's covering our conscious experience. You know, no one really knows the capabilities of our subconscious experience.
well, maybe again, this would just be a play on words. Maybe that's what DMT and elevated states do. They allow the proverbial mirror into your subconscious. So it is, and that's maybe tapping into that higher self, you know, so right. with Jung, or, you know, separating the ego into its different parts, or, you know, just that again, IFS work, knowing that there's your internal parts, but then there's a higher self. Maybe that's in essence what we're doing, is where, you know, so my pushback on that, again, and maybe it's a colorful play on words, was, well, yeah, well, in the DMT space, you are tapping into your subconscious. Well, maybe that's another way of saying what the DMT realm is, you know, and I'm kind of just saying that on the fly. I'm not saying hey, that's my new philosophy, but it's like, well, what does it mean? And I think that's where, like, my past, and I studied insects in college. So I was an entomologist, right? So everything was like science, data, everything needs to be proved in a lab. And I thought incorrectly, like, there's no way you could be a rigid scientist and also be religious or spiritual. They just don't jive. And then when I got out of college and I started studying the world's religions and spirituality, I really realized that they were just trying to describe the very same thing. They were just using different words and different nomenclature to describe it, which is, what is this beautiful, wonderful world that's highly complex and it's damn near impossible to explain? Let's come up with terms to try to explain it. And I found more similarities than differences. So, and even just the lens that all of your guests are bringing to, we're all trying to, in essence, solve that big final question. What is consciousness? What is your original life? How are we like this conscious being? But again, it's all going to be lessened in not even come close to answering if we try to use words. So I think that, you know, that in itself is a limitation. But, you know, I think there are some stereotypes and archetypes because just that they're common, they happen often, and they seem to be, you know, connected to us all. So
can you explain the experience of one of your encounters with these entities? Like, when you're in this, is this almost like a dream state that is simulating on play? Do you have autonomy in this world? Are you able to kind of have a sense of agency? Can you direct what's happening, or is it like you're in a theater production, or you're in a dream state where you can't control? And I'm curious, are you able to prompt the entity where it responds to what you're saying, or responds to what you're thinking, or responds to some sort of modality and then responds back to you? Like, I'm curious, we say encounter like that's something that everyone should understand what that means, but I'm so curious in what that what that word actually means. Like, are you talking to the thing? Are you dancing with it? Are you playing tennis with it? Like, what does encounter mean?
So there's that sweet spot that, again, there's level to that DMT level. So that sweet spot where you're still kind of conscious, and cognitive of where you're at. And yes, you do have a two-way, you know, dialogue. But then again, dial it up. I mentioned like that first day where I had that breakthrough session where everything went black. You know, that's a different interaction. And then there's been other ones that again we'll possibly get into that go beyond that. But no, typically, yeah, the entity interactions are dynamic. They are fluid. You can interact with them. And so I guess let's take it beyond the gestury ones. And the first few times, couple times that I started getting into DMT space, so maybe the first 20, 30 times, it was almost like I would elevate my consciousness. I'd get to this level where I was able to tap into where those entity or jesters were. And I use the analogy of like, I was almost like an animal in a zoo on display. So I would pop up and like I would go into the DMT space and I would be, or like a firefly flashing, in a dark field. And then they would all gravitate and look to me, be like, holy shit, like here's this human consciousness. This is Adam. And then when I started coming back 20, 30, 40 times, it was like, cool. Like they were there, they were welcoming me, they were happy, and they knew that I was there with good intentions. And it really was interacting with this group of fluid, dynamic, welcoming things. And then that was kind of like, hey, let me show you the back of the house. And so to answer yourself, yeah, there was a physical, geographical, spatial place where then it was, all right, let me take you back to where, and I know this is going to sound weird, but it was like where like the elders in their young,
Adam. All of this is incredible. What do you mean? What do you mean? This is going to sound weird?
Just this part. Yeah.
What do you mean? Just this next sentence is going to be a bit weird, guys. All of this is weird.
Every old entities and young entities. No, but like I did feel as like that was kind of like the welcoming committee tribe, and then they brought me back to really there was more, like welcome me into where their inner sanctum was, and it was populated with entities and spaces, and so that's one aspect. And without getting into the whole range of every entity, but I think another one that answers your question and adds a little bit of depth to it too is people always, typically reference mantis or insectoid interactions. So how are those distinct from the jesters and the elves? Completely different energy, completely different vibe, completely different everything. So my interaction, and I've had a handful, and again, when you have them, it's like, yes, this is awesome. But my impression, and again, being an entomologist, I understand where people are saying insectoid or mantis-like. They're larger in stature. They seem to be like long and spindly. They have multiple appendages, whether that be 6, I'm not quite sure. But they seem to be like jointed and able to kind of like really move and, like Marvel comic kind of characters. Those typically are explained as like the technicians of that space, or the engineers of the space that know how to manipulate, correct. And every time I've interacted with them, they've basically taken my body over and in a whether they actually like came around it like from the back, almost like a transformer, like kind of getting into it, or I was on almost like a display table and they were over me, and it was teaching me how to use my human body to its fullest potential. And again, it sounds simple, but how do you breathe properly? How do you absorb oxygen into your cells properly? How do your synapses, fire? And you're hearing all these things happening, and they're getting in. And the analogy that I use is they're giving you the guidebook or the handbook to all the coolest features that this human body has. And we think we only have 5 senses, but we've got 100. We think we're only, a gas engine, but we've got a turbocharger, a supercharger, and a nitrous boost. We think we only have one life. We've got, and it was really them take over and fix and adjust the shit that I needed, but then also be like, you are so much greater than. And those are the experiences that
fascinating
you take back, and they actually, they stay and land in a really just a real life application of that. I'm not a musician. I've never played an instrument. I don't know how to read music. I enjoy music, but I don't have whatever. I've come out of sessions before and have no idea how to like play the drums or whatever, or know even how to pick up the beat. But then you'll be driving, and instead of just tapping with 1 or 2 fingers, like all 8 fingers are tapping to a different symbol and beat. And it's like, well, how the hell did my brain just pick up the capacity to separate the nuanced treble beat of just the drum roll, where it's like, and you're finding yourself just doing it intuitively. Or you'll walk through the woods and you're hearing every bird chirp, every fucking wind of going through the branch, everything. Like, that the waterfall's a quarter mile away because you're starting to hear the water. Like, everything just becomes hypersensitive because in that space you've already experienced it. And that's really a cool part, is that you come back knowing like, wow, we really are incredible. And
great example. That's a super interesting example. Do they have like stable identities across time? Like what I'm curious about, like, will they be able to communicate with you in a way that like they'll either bring up your past experience, or like, is there some sort of continuity through time where you can trip on across months or across weeks, and you'll be able to have some sort of experience with this entity that, you know, is either talking about or communicating in some way about a past experience or a future experience. You know what I mean? Are these entities basically continuous in time in any way?
Perfect segue for probably one of the cooler interactions that I had. But I would say, you know, most of my interactions are distinct. So, you know, it's not like I would go in, you know, I have a DMT session and a week later I go back and we pick up at the same place or the same location. They typically are their own kind of distinct, you know, situations. Now, like most people that explore these kind of expanding consciousness modalities, a lot of people have senses of past lives, or they remember like in a deja vu setting of being in India or being in whatever, Rome, or, you know, and that's, I've had several of those. Now that could also just be regular dream states. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that I've gone back and experienced my past lives. I've had visions of things that that kind of hinted to that. But I think that's where we could maybe just interpret that as me being creative and thinking I wanted to be some Indian guy, you know, on an ashram somewhere. But one experience that I had that was very clear, that was one of those like, oh shit, where do you put that in the experience of hundreds that really stood out was, so it was one of those experiences where I was gone, and not in an intrusive way and not in any kind of like sexual way, but there were multiple times where I would go and almost kind of be displayed on a, you know, on like an examination bed, and the entities would come and just look. And but again, kind of like an animal in a zoo way, in a cool way, like this is a human, this just like we would see if we saw an alien. Or like, again, I'm a bug guy, so if I see a cool bug, I'm so excited, but I'm touching it lovingly. I'm not trying to hurt it. I'm going to put it back in its place. You know, I feel like that's how they typically interact with you. Like really, they're excited to interact with this human consciousness. Well, in one of those experiences, and again, this is going to sound weird, but it was very, very distinct that my future self came and interacted with myself, and not me as an older man, not me with a longer beard, not even me as a human. And this is one of those, well, what did it look like? What this was a non-physical energy or you know, imprint of my soul or spirit. And that was a fucking weird one. So, you know, I'm laying there and, you know, I guess being tickled by these elves, and it's like, yeah, cool. You like doing this? Like, you know, I'm here for it. And that, if this is what you want to do. But then that sense of my future self came in, and that was one of those like really shake you out of it, because it instantly conveyed that, hey, I'm here to do a diagnostic check. I'm just coming in to make sure everything's kind of good. And yeah, like you're on the right path. We're cool. And it really was so comforting.
Wow.
And so just, and for a lot of reasons, you know, most people come out of a psychedelic experience or a deep one having a lack of fear of death, or a lack of fear of, you know, knowing that they're going to transmute their energy into something else. And I had that prior to this, just with all of my profound experiences and my communication with, you know, higher source or energy. But that one really solidified, you know, 1,000%. I have zero fear of death. I have zero fear that this energy of atom or spirit or soul or whatever you want to call it is going to transmute into something else. Now, what that form is, again, I couldn't visualize the form, but it was clearly me in some sort of future or different state coming in to check in. And
It's so interesting.
and if I could on that, and this is where no one knows and it's all speculation. Was that just me, Adam Butler, with all of my trauma and all of my experiences, coming up with me hallucinating, and wow, that's a creative story? Yes, that is a possibility. Is it possible that actually happened, that I did go into this elevated, you know, hyperspace of DMT and I actually had this interaction with myself? Yes. You know, I think we have to put that on the possibility. Does it matter? Not to say I don't care. It doesn't really bother me. And I don't need to know if I'm right or wrong, because you'll never really know the true answer to that. But what I take back is it had life-changing, life-saving effects on me, my perspective, my interactions with others, how I navigate myself in the world. Do I want to live and wake up happy, or do I want to get up and go off into the woods? And that's the transformative change. That is the neuroplasticity. That is the neurogenesis. That something does happen in the brain. And that's where all these other experts that you have on will back me up and say, no, yeah, this isn't just hippy dippy stories. Like actual physiological changes happen, which then lead to changes in people's mental states, which then means the mom and dad doesn't go off and hurt themselves and leave families behind. And like, I just met a buddy who came out of the military. He personally knows 40 men and women that have taken their lives since, and he's a young man. And it's like, those are the numbers that are too high. Yeah. So if these stories can have that type of change in the way our wiring is, I don't give a shit if it's people, tripping and just thinking it and, oh yeah, he interacted with his future self. Okay, well, it helped save my life and help me now others, but to do that for others. And that's the change that I'm so passionate about, just kind of trying to demystify the stigma and taboo about psychedelics. And it doesn't have to be this rave party scene with fluorescent colors and people, and I'm not crapping on that. There's a place for that. And there's, if that's a way of creative expressing yourself, cool. I'm really focusing on the therapeutic, how do we help people rewire themselves? And it's interactions like that happen, that really change your life, change how you be a mom, a dad, a whatever, how you look at yourself in the mirror. And
I love it, man.
Yeah. So that's an important one. That was a fun one. That was oh shit, what just happened?
No, it's insane. I mean, so powerful. I think like so many people could benefit from, themselves in the future, just giving them you're doing okay, buddy. Like, just keep going. You're doing great. Like it's so
right?
sad that people, it's so sad that we live in a world where we don't get that from the people in our immediate circle on an ongoing basis. But like, God, that can be so powerful. And I think you're so right on the point of, it's very interesting to talk about the differences between like, are DMT entities real? Are they hallucination? That's an interesting conversation to talk about. But what is completely indisputable is that the transformational mental health benefits that these things are having, like hallucination, fake, real, a property of the brain, a property of the universe, doesn't like, if it's
a great
having
philosophical
the transformational mental, like it's all noise in the argument of like, it's having a transformational effect, and nobody can dispute that. I think that's a really good point. Nobody can dispute the crazy numbers that are coming out on these studies in terms of, whether it's veterans of PTSD or it's, heroin addiction and if people are taking with Ibogaine, or it's PTSD with MDMA, or it's couples therapy with MDMA, or it's depression with psilocybin, or, one after the other, these incredible results with crazy effect sizes are coming out just again and again and again. So you can be as skeptical as you want on the mechanism, whether it's real, fake, hallucinatory, whatever. Doesn't really matter if it bloody works. And again, I think it's really interesting to talk about that difference. And I think I'm going to keep having those conversations, because there's certainly more gold to mine in those conversations on figuring out those differences. But at the end of the day, the person that can't get out of bed and they wake up and they have absolutely no hope for that day, they have no hope for their life, they don't give a fuck if it's a hallucination, fake or real, if it has the impact that it gives them hope.
Beautifully said. Perfectly said. Yeah. I don't need to add to that. Perfect.
You mentioned the Monroe Institute a few times.
Yes. It was awesome.
What the hell? What the hell is that? What is that?
So, that's one of those things where, like you mentioned, telepathy tapes, and there's some skepticism there, and there's so I went to Monroe not necessarily as a skeptic, but like DMT, Monroe kind of came into my life in this weird way where in a matter of like a couple weeks, like 3 or 4 people brought it up. It got brought up on my social media feeds. And the sum of the story is there's a gentleman named Robert Monroe that in the late 1900s, I think like in 1980, 1985 or something like that, he had what we would describe as an out-of-body experience. And he's written several books about it where, in essence, he was laying in bed at night with his wife, and he woke up because his body was like elevated on like at the ceiling level, and he was looking down at his wife and laying in bed with another man, which was, his actual physical body, and kind of like freaked out, like, what the hell is happening? And again, a story where it's like, well, that right off the jump, that sounds like a bullshit story. Well, he had the finances. He was a successful, businessman in the telecommunications field. So like radio frequencies and things like that. And his area of, passion was, is there a way of altering your consciousness or your ability to get into deep meditative states with certain frequencies of sound? So with different meditations, different whatever. And they use a technology called binaural beats. And all that means is, each one of your ears takes in a separate frequency. And my understanding is the human brain can only register, up to 20 hertz. So anything under that, it just can't pick up. But if you have 100 hertz in one ear and 108 in the other ear, your brain will register that difference of 8 hertz. And then he found that there are levels in that, subhuman range that will get you into certain states. So one would be maybe more conducive for deep sleep meditation. One may be more of a heightened physical state. So that way you're more physiologically, energetically charged. One may allow you to get into a state that will actually allow you to separate from your physical body and separate your consciousness, right? Again, all of these claims are like, well, that's kind of bullshit. But when you kind of think back about what every one of your guests are talking about how it's all about vibration, it's all about electricity, it's all about changing of, the phases on cell membranes, to say that injecting your brain with certain sound frequencies would elicit a change, that was, I can understand what that step was. So I had already, in my psychedelic states, I would say that I had out-of-body experiences. I had certainly, separated my consciousness from whatever. I had interactions with non-physical, non-corporeal beings. I had done a lot of the things that their technology had claimed to do. So I went there with the intent of, seeing if there were any similarities to those, my psychedelic experiences with theirs, and kind of trying to debunk them. Now, I do want to say too, I never did any psychedelics there, and it was really to separate the two. And my first day was like, hey, am I going to know the difference between focus level 10 and 12? And well, I know one in 15 and 21. And
maybe set the scene a little bit more, just to take a couple steps back. This is an actual physical institution, a place. Maybe just give that
correct
context. Like, what is this physical location building now? What do people go there to do? Maybe just a few steps back to give that context, because even I'm very ignorant to this.
Sure. Okay, so this is in Virginia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So there's a campus that's actually built like next to his family home that he had back in the day. And this beautiful setting out in the country. It houses, I think, like 25 people go like at a time, so it's not a massive campus, but they have the recording studio where they actually do all their like recordings for their binaural beats. So in essence, you go there and there's several programs that you can go through. And in essence, it's training with deep meditation combined with guided meditations, and some of it's in darkness. And, so there's a lot of other modalities, but through all of that, you wear headphones that have and they call it Hemi-Sync technology. So it's syncing the two hemispheres of your brain. And again, so if say at 10 hertz, your body can it just becomes really easy to meditate and chill. Well, again, they'll hide that binaural frequency within either a guided meditation or just, pleasant music, and your body just innately and naturally responds to that vibration. Just like if you had a tuning fork or a singing bowl or a sound vibration bowl, put next to your body, you would just stop feeling that. So with each level that they have, the desired outcome is a different energetic or physiological response. Again, one would be more calming, and then say the other one would be more energetically charged. So I went there kind of saying bullshit. Like, so you're telling me I'm going to just put on headphones and you're going to get my body to do all this weird shit? And the answer is yes. So yes, there has to be intention. Yes, you have to be an active participant. Yes, you can't go there being like, well, I'm going to have an out-of-body experience and watch this. But as a tool to help you and to push you to those levels. So like their motto is, you're more than your physical body. Like, you clearly know that if you've ever done psychedelics, and you would clearly know that once you've done the Monroe technology, because there's a very distinct separation from your physical body and then the energetic feel around you. And again, through their guided meditations and then their energetically charged binaural beats. And then, it's 6 days of back to back to back, 8 hours of meditation, so you're in it, like, you're there for a specific purpose. So your body's already charged and ready to go. And it was very clear within the first couple of days that yes, this technology works, and that I could just add it to another, add it as a toolkit to my technology of self-knowledge and self-love. And I did write a paper, and I can send it to you, about like just 10 bullet points of commonalities that I found in the psychedelic state as well as in the advanced meditative state through the Monroe Institute. So I mentioned like you're more than your physical body. Another one is, you are never alone. So not only in a group mentality, and this is maybe part of the mental health thing, on this planet as humans, we're never alone. We do have a collective group of humans to have our back. But really that statement of we're never alone is that there are non-physical, non-corporeal, sentient beings in this other space. So, again, whether it's DMT entities or in the psychedelic space or in these deep meditation at Monroe, I was clearly interacting with similar type entities. The comment about everything's vibration. Again, DMT starts with a vibratory hum and then everything elevates with that. Same thing with Monroe. It's truly sound frequency and vibration. And not to go through all of the 10 bullet points, but there was just what I came away from that is to, again, tie back to how we started our conversation is it's not just DMT or psychedelics. It's not the Monroe Institute. It's not putting on headphones with a certain frequency. Your body can do all of that endogenously. That was actually one of the points, is that it's endogenous. So the people that are really good and trained at Monroe technology, you can get to those elevated states just by meditating and knowing what the feeling is, what the sensation is. And with practice, you can get to their focus levels on your own.
And did you achieve, because I mean, you have so much experience with DMT. Like, could you honestly say that you experienced an intensity of experience that is comparable to a DMT trip without ingesting any substance whatsoever?
No, whole different geometry and physics. Yeah. So there was not that hypermorphing interacting, it was stable. So it was more like a hyper lucid dream state. So
explain more.
So in the DMT space, I mean, it is truly the complexity of shapes and moving and how you're kind of looking at the periphery, but as well as from the inside. And it's just this constant moving dynamic. At the Monroe Institute, it was still like I was always in my physical form. I was never interacting with morphing serpent beings. It was like being in a waking dream state, but a lucid waking dream state. So
and you're
clearly not real.
An environment in this when you say dream state, lucid dream state, your eyes closed, navigating an environment.
So, and I have a very colorful, vivid mind, and I see pictures a lot. So I can just explain. So one of the guided meditations was, so we're comfortable, we're in our own unit. The lights are off, we're good. We're gonna go into the space for whatever, an hour and a half. So the guided meditation is, you're getting yourself calm, and then with prompts, it's, what are the different aspects of yourself? And if we are going to go beyond our physical body, so what other than Adam Butler's ego is there? What, do you have guardian angels? Can you tap into, can I talk to my deceased grandfather? And those are the types of, that was kind of the general feel of what that meditation was. And I went in, and I was actually in this cave setting, and very hypervisually, I had, in the States, there was a cartoon back in the day called Fraggle Rock. And it was just all these Muppet cartoon characters that were they all had big noses and gnarly hair, and really the whole cave got filled with these Fraggle Rock characters. And they were yeah, I'm we're here. We're your badass guardian angels. And they were one aspect of myself that really came into view. And then, the other aspect of myself, came walking out of the back of the cave, and then we had an interaction. So it's vivid interactions like that, yes, they're subjective, and it's hard for me to say, well, one thing caused one or the other, but the intent was to have that meditation, was to have interactions beyond that. And, on a random Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m., I'm in a cave interacting with my Fraggle Rock guardian angels. Something caused me to do that. I wasn't on drugs. Let's equate that to the meditation and what they were putting through my ears, because you do really feel your body start to hum and change once it gets to these, to these levels.
Did it feel comparable to an actual dream or your typical dream experience? Do you commonly lucid dream, and do you have dream experiences that were like these meditative states?
So I do lucid dream often, and I would say this is more interactive and realistic than even a lucid dream, because you're fully there, you're fully present. The interaction and dialogue is, there's no dreamlike state where you're kind of in a movie-like setting. Like it really was
Interesting.
like I knew I was awake. I knew I was in meditation. I knew I was at Monroe, but I was also interacting with these entities.
And could you maintain this state for a long time? Is this like a 10-second thing, or like or much
No,
longer?
This was going for, sometimes, they were 2-hour meditations, and and that was part of it though, is training it, so training to get the clutter and the noise out of your brain, to, even just to put your phones and computers away for a week, like that. Again, without the Monroe technology and without psychedelics, how much benefit would people get just to be in the woods for a week with no phone and no bullshit and no like that, so, and again, maybe that's the key takeaway, is these modalities help and they catalyze and maybe they help remove the crust to begin with, but it is all the answers are already within us. Really,
I don't
it's
disagree
not
with that.
it's not,
When you say Monroe technology, are you specifically referring to the binaural beats?
correct. So they have it copyrighted as Hemi-Sync technology, but the concept of binaural beats, there are many knockoffs or many people that use that, even just for like sleep music before you go to bed. You can put on, and maybe similar to like the solfeggio frequencies, or there's a lot of music out at like 432 hertz or 963 or whatever, and it's just it seems to have a calming effect. Like even when I'm writing, I'll have like background just flow music going on, and it's like when I hit that play, it's almost like an instant calming. I don't know, like my body now is in receptive mode to getting to the writing, state, and very similar. And so now I'm almost like, I look forward. My part of my writing routine is put on that music, and it's very comforting, and I instantly get into it. So same thing with the modality of practicing Monroe Institute. You can imagine, all right, I'm going to get into deep meditation. I want to talk to my deceased mom or dad. This is the modality I do, and you do it, and you do it. And again, if it works for you, you keep doing it. If not, then, don't. But these modalities do seem to work for a lot of people. And I think it is just, once people have done it once or twice, and they've kind of seen the light, so to speak, or they've seen their true ability, that's what you take back into the normal walking, everyday life. And you're like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like I am that special, or whatever it may be. And again, that's the power of these experiences.
How did your experiences compare to the other people that were at the retreat in that week? Would you say that everyone experienced something that was quite transformational for them? Were there people that were like, nah, this is still bullshit. I sat here for 40 hours with an annoying hum in my ear, and I still hate my job, and I'm still going to go back to my corporate bullshit. What was the overall consensus?
Great question. And I would answer that kind of and tie it in with somebody, maybe if they were saying like, hey, they want to do DMT just to interact with an entity, or they want to do DMT just to see the laser experiment. Or like, if that's why you're doing DMT, then you're probably not going to see an entity or see the laser code, because it's just like, you don't go in there making those demands. So even in like our initial interview, so to have like, when somebody says like a true out of body experience, where they're like really physically like removed from their body and like actually in another space, and again, say what you will, but there's multiple kind of documented cases of this, where even the U.S. government for decades pumped millions and millions of dollars into something called the Gateway Project, and it was really exploring these types of remote viewing. But they say, typically about 5% of the people have a true out of body experience in the group of, in their services. And our group was 25 people. So in essence, they were saying, like, if you're here for that, maybe adjust your mindset, and then, but it can and will happen. There was of the group, there was only one person that had what I would consider a full blown out of body experience. And of all the people to be able to describe it, it was him. And not to start throwing names out there, but you're in the podcast scene, so maybe you know of him. There's a podcast out here called Third Eye Drops. The host is Michael Phillip.
I'm of course familiar, yeah.
So he was my roommate at Monroe. I actually did a really good interview with him, which is what got me onto the whole podcast scene. It has like 150,000 views, which is like, for some small guy like myself, that's freaking massive.
200 now. I was watching it today.
That's fucking awesome. But so just like, so it was so cool where this whole week we're having this experience, and we're really having these because he's a deep meditator. He's experienced psychedelics before, he's experienced doing these things. And we both had a really
really great week. We had great meditations, and we'd come out and journal, and in the debriefing, we'd all be emotional, and it was fantastic. But and actually, it's funny. I just sent him a picture of it today because I'm reviewing my Monroe stuff for another project I'm working on. And I have in my notes, like, he woke up fucking ghost white, and it was just like, Adam, oh my God, Adam, like, and something. And he goes, dude, I was like begging for you to like help and snap out of it, but I was deep in my meditative state, so I couldn't like hear him to get out of it. But he came out, and the way he just described it was very clearly what people describe as the out-of-body experience. Was, yes, he had just spent a week doing this modality. Yes, you could understand playing with your physical aura and your resonant bubble around you, and can you talk to non-corporeal beings? Like, these are all things where, yeah, after a week of deep meditation, we can all, I say, creatively do. Well, this was, dude, I was standing in a kitchen. I had no idea where I was. I was clearly at a window. I was looking out at the specific field, and it was clear as day. I was at another sink with, there was like shit, and like, it blew his mind about just the difference of spatially, how it looked, how it felt, energetically, how it felt, how scared he was, that he really knew, oh shit, I'm completely out of my physical body. And then once he realized that, he kind of snapped out of it, and he was truly nervous if he could get his spirit, I guess, back in his physical body. And that's when he was kind of yelling out for me to be like, Adam, help, because it was terrifying, because he knew he was physically removed from his body. Now, you hear that and you'd be like, maybe colorful. He actually does a great job of explaining that experience. But what I can maybe put out there is, as not proof, but to say that this is not just an organization trying to sell their program and offer some whatever bullshit modality. The reason why the U.S. government pumped millions and millions of dollars in decades and decades was because there was actual military applications that worked. So these remote viewers, one of them, Joe McGonigal, is like the remote viewer number one. Like, he's the main guy. There was a movie called Hunt for Red October that was based off of his remote viewings of, like a hidden Russian sub that they didn't know where it was. It was a completely different style of hull. Like, he described everything about this to the T, where it was going to be, when it was going to be launched, and they ended up like finding it. And again, that's what that movie Hunt for Red October is based on. There's multiple government files that show that this worked in different military senses. But now in his retired age, how he's using this technique in his remote viewing ability is really they're helping find kidnapped kids and lost kids. So and real life shit, and again, real life training of like, other police officers and shit like that, where a kid will be missing. He's missing for 3 weeks. They'll bring in Joe, and literally he'll sit there and he'll be like, all right, there's a blue backpack with the red sneakers. It's near the well house. I'm seeing the bridge. He'll find it, and like in 6 hours, they'll go find the kid, and everything is right there as he saw it.
Really?
So even to the point where he's got brought in by the FBI to be like, how the fuck do you know these details unless you were part of the murder or part of the whatever, or part of the kidnapping? Where, and again, do the research and look into it. That there's just cases and cases.
This is where I would be quite. I'd be very skeptical, and this is also where
little kids' lives are being saved. So scared, petrified kids that have been kidnapped are out in the woods, and Joe and his people he's training are finding these kids, and they now, then he's not shy about it. They get paid consultation fees and hide out as private individuals, and they're constantly booked because they work and they're finding people and saving lives. And it's like, so that's where it's like, yeah, take it out of the Monroe hyper-diaper or hyper-dippy, whatever. Let's go talk to angels and gods to, no, with proper training. And so if you believe this, and I do, that our body is more than our five senses, that we can elevate that to become hypersensitive, and that there is vibratory, energetic information in the universe around us, that if we just increase our sensitivity, we can pick it up. So yeah, if with training, can humans do this type of non-local viewing? Yes. And so I heard it firsthand from somebody that now I consider a friend. I'm once in that guy, Michael Phillip, in real time, and then subsequently after hearing his stories. But then to sit with that guy, Joe, for 2 hours and listen to him share his stories about real life stuff that's like proven. So how it works, no one really knows, but it does. There is enough there to explore.
I'm so conflicted on this just because, it sounds insane, first off, but I'm just, if you have a situation where somebody is not with the right intention here, and they're wasting the police time, and they're pretending to have this sort of experience, or maybe they actually really do believe that they are doing it, and they are just hampering an investigation of some sort, and they actually are actively, harming the chances of finding those kids. That's where my mind goes. I'm like, that can be really conflicting, because I'm not comparing it, but there are these viral cases of like, what was it, like an Oprah clip of they're talking to a someone who claims to see the future, and she was like saying that someone is dead, and then Oprah was like, no, she's alive, like she's literally on the phone right now, and there's like a viral clip of that. And I don't know if I have exactly the right. I'm so skeptical of like really, really extraordinary claims, because I also think everything. I actually don't disagree with any of the things that you said, that, possibly we are able to tap into these higher vibrational, fields. What exactly that sentence means, I'm not entirely clear. I don't disagree with that, but just it's the really extraordinary stuff where people are claiming to have these abilities, where I don't know. I haven't seen the numbers. I haven't seen the actual conclusive data that this person has helped police in a way that is beyond guesswork or chance. I would have to see that. I think everyone should be in a healthy way skeptical about this. Please send me all of the links after this call. I'll put them in the description so everyone can do their own work. Because I think so much of what you said is true, and we shouldn't be inherently believing or not believing because of how crazy something sounds, because that's not a very good heuristic. There's a lot of crazy things that sound crazy that are just completely true. Programs like MK Ultra sort of shattered my ability to like discredit things out of hand. So totally believe things are possible, but it's just so conflicted when there's someone claiming to have abilities to help children that could be hampering an investigation.
Yeah, but then you talk to the parents of the kid who was saved in that very house. So that's where I'm conflicted too. But it's like, again, I guess if the facts prove it out. Another interesting rabbit hole that, again, I'm trying to tie this all in. There's a gentleman, an author named Anthony Peake. He's written several books that they all seem to tie into kind of DMT, but his area of expertise is like near-death experiences, and that correlation to some of the DMT experiences. But one of the areas that he focuses on are people that have temporal lobe epilepsy, and then people that have migraine headache auras. Excuse me, and these people with these temporal lobe epilepsy episodes, their experience seems to be very, very DMT-like. I mean, down to the vibratory hum, down to the entities, down to the hyperreal space. It is very, very compelling. He's wrote several books on it. And again, not saying he's got the answer. It's just there's something here that at some elevated state, when the body as an antenna or receiver can vibrate and hum and receive different information come in. I mean, it's really just that basic, but that there's something there that our bodies are just can be highly tuned. Yeah. And I think maybe because and again, going back to all this Huxley's reducing valve, we have to filter out a majority of the electromagnetic spectrum, but then what other spectrums are there out there just for survival rates in order to,
that's where I think it makes complete sense. In that we evolved and developed sensors that are optimal for our survival in normal conditions. It makes complete sense that pharmacological intervention could shift those sensors and access information that we didn't have previously. I mean, that just makes total sense. There's no disputing that. It's just going from that to somebody can teleport. I don't know if you use the word teleport, but like non-locally view
I get it.
And I've had an out-of-body experience. One that I will absolutely was 100% an out-of-body experience. It was 100% ketamine induced. So not reached through any sort of deep contemplative effort and meditation. I was purely recreationally consuming ketamine with my friends, and I shrunk up into the corner of the room like I was a CCTV camera, and I stared down at the back of my head and the back of my neck.
What the fuck does that mean?
I have some, I talked to Thomas Metzinger, who's one of the leading researchers in the world in out-of-body experiences. I think there's some explanations for that. I don't think we fully understand it, and I'm not trying to, again, apply sort of a materialist framework to all of this, because I don't think we understand all of it. I don't think that necessarily, has any really crazy. I think we can absolutely separate ourselves from our physical body in space and time. I think absolutely we create our own space and time. So I think being able to separate ourselves from it is not a huge jump. The final one I want to touch on, because this is going on a little bit. And it's been so fun. Really, really, really incredible conversation. I want to touch on the DMT laser. Another one that I am, healthily skeptical of, but I'm happy that I'm happy the work is being done. I'm happy that there is like these sort of questions are being probed in these ways. But I am skeptical of it. So let's try and, what is this DMT laser experiment, and what exactly do you think it says?
So there's a gentleman, Danny Gola, who in one of his DMT-induced states had and I don't know how the actual laser was like shining on the wall, but realized that there was this weird code that was coming out of the laser that didn't seem that was like any other DMT, visualization or anything that he had seen before. And so after now exploring it further, he's producing this documentary, and there's thousands of people that have seen the code and now, making their own drawings, me included, trying to figure out what exactly is he seeing. And, he mentions that it's the code of reality. That is a catchy term to basically say, I don't know what the hell it is. It's a code for something. But I want to preface that where he is not saying that he's got it all figured out and he's translated the code and now he's the Rosetta Stone, so to speak, to some alien language. What he is saying is that there is something there. And I kind of did that same experiment with the same kind of skepticism that I went to the Monroe Institute, and same thing like I went with the doctor's
Would you mind
retreat,
laying out just exactly what because there's what this experiment actually is, like what exactly jumping a little bit, if you could take just 2 steps back to like what exactly produces this code, like what is the physical thing that you're doing?
So it's just a regular low energy laser. But not one that you would like, not like a pinpoint laser, and not just one that you'd get like at a hardware store that like measures. There's a lens on it that diffuses it. So instead of being like a fine point or a fine line, it's diffracted into about an inch or so wide. So it's this really low energy diffracted band of laser. And again, I'll send you a picture of. Actually, I'll send you the video that has pictures and yeah. So it's. When you're looking at this, narrow band of about an inch and a half projected on a wall, and you slightly elevate yourself with DMT. Now, not full blown. And again, that's where that levels that Andres was talking about. Like you're not going to entity interaction level. You're certainly not going to breakthrough energy level. You're getting right into that nice vibratory hum where you're elevated, but you can still be conscious and present. And you have to look, and it's not like something is on the surface of the laser. It's not like something's even on the wall. There's a set of books called Magic Eye books. And again, I don't know if you had them over there where you live, but books where you look at an image and you kind of have to like look through it and then the image would pop out. That's what you have to kind of look through into the laser. And you have to kind of train your eyes to kind of like look through the window screen beyond the window, and like it's in layers, or the analogy of like focusing if you're using a microscope. If you're trying to focus in on one specific like organelle, you really get to find it through the layers. And so there is this code embedded. This is what he's saying, that there's a code embedded in the laser, that it's got this raining code. Like if you watch the Matrix movie, like that green code that they see raining down, basically he was saying, yes, there's like Matrix code. It kind of looks like Japanese symbols and it's clearly there. That all sounds like bullshit to me. Like that sounds like you're trying to sell a movie. What do you mean there's Matrix code raining? And I've been in the DMT space. I've looked at plenty of lasers where you're blowing weed smoke through it, right? And you see all the swirly stuff moving in the laser. I'm thinking it's one of those things. Like no, not no way, but I'll try it, because as I mentioned before we started recording, I'm not saying I'm an expert in anything. What I am is an authentic person that has I shouldn't say no filter. My filter is so refined that I do screen out all the bullshit. I'll only speak authentically. That's what's happened to me. And I figured, well, that's what I can bring to this DMT laser experience. I'll explain what I did. Did I see it or not? I was thinking I wouldn't see it, and I would just kind of say, hey, I didn't see it, and this is what it is. I'll now add another piece to my authenticity, and people will know that I'm not bullshitting. Well, when I did the experiment and saw the code, it was kind of like, oh, fuck, like he wasn't joking and there is something there. And if I could, this is what I'm trying to bring to his code experiment. Again, not saying that I had the Rosetta Stone to translate it. I tried to do the best that I can to show the symbols. But what I'm trying to understand, or what I'm like the big question that I'm posing and not answering, but really posing, is everything in the DMT space is just so moving and morphing and dynamic. And, I bring up like Alex Gray paintings or any, any one of these like new AI generated art that is just so dynamic and moving and shifting and morphing. And there's everything that is just like in so many different dimensional spaces. And then you're in like the middle of it, and just all the beautiful ways of describing the chaotic movement of a DMT space is whatever, like it, so everybody's been describing it as such. If you think about a laser, again, just naturally, there's all that moving, morphing part of the laser. There's just normal shit that happens if you were to blow smoke in it, or if you were to see dust. So I'm thinking laser, DMT, it's going to be even more chaotic, and it's just going to be all this crazy movement. That's what I was expecting. And, so you're looking at the laser, and that's what you're seeing. The mind's morphing because of the DMT, the lasers, and then all of a sudden, this very rigid grid work comes out very, very clearly and explicitly. This grid work came out, and it was completely rigid. It was completely structured. It was at full 90-degree angles, and it was clearly in place and not move. So you could move your head, you could move the laser, you could move wherever you were. But this grid work was naturally implanted, was completely like in this space, in this like in-between space of what was visible in the laser. And then, yes, within that very structured grid work at very distinct 90-degree angles was raining code. And the code would, like each symbol would rain down. And again, it's so fast and it's minuscule. Like it's really, really, really tiny. And then as the symbols would rain down, the code or the symbol to the right or left of it, so, and I'm trying to visualize it, but like, say there was a line like this, and then the box next would have a line like this, and then the next line would be like up, and then maybe the next one would be connected. So you'd have the code raining down, but then it'd be scattered like horizontal images and things going out as those symbols connected. So again, I'm sitting there in this slightly elevated DMT space, looking at all the swirling natural stuff, and then all of a sudden, a very rigid 90-degree structured grid comes out. And then there is universally sized images that are raining down and it did, and again, this is one of those where maybe Robin would say like, well, he's just referencing the Matrix video because that's what they said and that's what they put in the screen of the video. And that's no, like and because I've got nothing to sell, nothing to prove. I could give a shit if you buy my book or not. Like, that's not why I'm doing this. It really is. I'm trying to figure this shit out. And there was something in there that I've never seen in that DMT space before. And again, is it the code of reality? Is it a code from an alien? Is it the code from God? Some people have said, well, maybe you're looking at, a Japanese made laser and you're just seeing like something, some subliminal message. And it's like, no, like there's clearly something there. And I guess that's what I want to share, is that I'm not backing him up. I'm not fanboying Danny. I'm not saying, oh yeah, like, watch his videos. It's that I went in there to kind of call his bluff to say, what are you seeing? And like, how is everybody saying they're seeing the same thing? But people are really seeing very, very similar things. And I guess to me, what really stands out is the rigidity and the non-movement. So how does everything move? How is everything dynamic? But there's just this stationary, static grid at straight 90-degree angles that doesn't move. And then I guess then the higher level to that is what the hell created that? Or what, again, is it, what non-human thing created that? Because I don't think it's, well, the laser manufacturer created it, because we're all using different lasers and we're all using, different stuff. So yeah, I have way more questions than answered, but there is something there. And the people that are seeing that, they're not just following the herd, or at least I'm not.
I think purely a few things on that. I think firstly, maybe Robin, I don't think he'd necessarily say that you're, some sort of conscious grifter. Again, I think it's levels deeper in the brain architecture, in the consciousness, in the reality building, that you would have absolutely no idea that you're doing it, I guess is the would be his perspective, I believe, in that, you know, everyone could have the perspective, I'm not, you know, doing this intentionally, and they're right. You're not intentionally creating these symbols or summoning it up, but it is, he would say, and I don't necessarily fully agree, I think it's part of the equation, that this is happening on levels that are way below your own conscious reality of what's happening, you know, like, so that's, I guess, point one. The only,
But doesn't even make it more interesting though. So like how,
for sure, but I guess
so what level of our subconscious is able to tap in to read this code?
It's definitely interesting, but it's definitely interesting, but it would be more of a brain explanation. It's more of a, so he explains this through his entropic brain principle, right? That you are basically increasing the entropy of information in the brain, and that is what psychedelics are doing. So this is happening on a deep subconscious level. So I don't think he's saying this is any less interesting. It's just that it's less alien. It's less of the Gallimore alien world building stuff. I think he thinks it's fine, interesting, and very fascinating. And it's not a reductive point. It's utterly ridiculous and weird and radical and cool. But that's his attempted explanation. I think that's part of it. I don't think it's the whole point. But I guess what I'm really skeptical of is simply the fact that, you know, people immediately jump to the idea that this is the code to the simulation, right? It's like that, to me, makes no, I don't understand where that jump is. Like, is there some,
he'll be the first to say that that's like, you know, it's a catchy term, but he's not saying it's like,
okay, maybe that's the way it's been clickbaited and thumbnailed and sort of caught in the media, because you know, that's how I was introduced to the idea, was those sort of thumbnails, you know, proof of simulation, all of this. And I'm like, I totally believe that there's a strange, weird-ass interaction between DMT and the physical optical properties of a 650 nanometer, you know, low energy like laser, you know, and that produces a strange effect that we don't have explanation for. I'm like, totally, you know, that seems completely reasonable and fine, and interesting that we figure out why this produces this strange effect. As you say, you were expecting all of this movement and this dynamism, and what you got didn't match that expectation. Cool, well, that's interesting, but it doesn't mean that you'd have to jump to the code of the simulation, right? Like, that's just like 50 levels of like, where the hell did we get that from?
Yeah, and he wouldn't. So he's actually, you know, he's quite the psychonaut, and his story, it you know, unfolds over years, and yeah, it's way deeper than that.
Well, I'll have him on. I'd love to speak to him.
I'll certainly make the connection. I think he'd be a great guest to have. You know, one other kind of just like it seems odd would be, you know, so say if you're deep in a psychedelic space, normally everything is universally psychedelic, and you know, when you're coming out of a shroom trip, like you know, you're slowly coming out and things kind of get back to reality. You know, the weird thing about that laser experiment is that this kind of, you're like two distinct, like, oh, I'm clearly in the elevated psychedelic DMT space, but then like, and everything's again moving and morphing and shifting, but then there's this rigidity and something kind of steps out of it. It would almost be like, you know, if you were tripping on shrooms or LSD and you've got whatever, like the whales kind of going across the wall and all the floor's melting and all this crazy shit's happening, but then like a normal real dog walks across and the dog looks completely normal. It's like, well, no, the dog would still look like trippy shrooms and the dog would have 8 eyes and like whatever, dragging a tail. Like that's the weirdness, where it's like, how does this grid work / code separate itself from not only what's seemingly normal waking state reality, but then this DMT kind of like hyperspace.
Have you tried to do the exact thing not on DMT? Like, have you tried to look for the code, everything is exactly the same except no DMT?
Yes, and I didn't see it, but I haven't like I you know, I think maybe if I were to go deep meditation, I did have multiple people respond to my my video saying that they've done it on shrooms, or seen the code in shrooms, that they've seen it on LSD. There's actually, so I mentioned Alex Gray. He's one of the most common, you know, psychedelic artist. He does some incredible artwork, but his wife is also an amazing artwork, and she did a PhD thesis on basically hidden code, like a hidden code language that she saw in one of her psychedelic states, and there's a whole book on it, and it's very similar. So, and you know, there's a term for it. It's eluding me now, but you know, this is not something that Danny is the first seeing, that hey, there's been this code, there's been some sort of alphabet or something coming out of in a psychedelic state. I mean, again, I think he's seeing what other people have seen. And again, Allison is her name, Allison Gray. She's got a whole book on it with her own code and her own language. So it's there. And if I, not to say just like wrap it up on this, but one of the things that I get asked, often, or when people are referencing DMT, the Strassman and Gallimore, DMT-X, and then Strassman's original study in the 90s typically comes up. And when these volunteers are coming out, a lot of times they're saying, this is more real than real. And that seems to be a very common kind of way of describing it. Yeah. And it would sound kind of counterintuitive, or if this is one of the strongest drugs, or if you're hallucinating that profoundly, how can it be more real than real? And I think in a very just easy, matter-of-fact way is, if what I'm saying is true about not only our 5 senses get dialed up, but then we have the additional, senses get added when we're in these states, that, in a normal walking state, say a normal 10-minute period in a normal walking state, say we're getting 100 data points of input, whatever that may be. When you're going into this DMT space, you're getting 1,000 data points, 1,000,000 data points, like whatever it may be. So it's not like, when you're coming back from these experiences, you have more data to sift through, more experiences, more perspectives, more of everything to build a more complex, vivid, detailed picture, not less. Like from somebody that used to be an alcoholic, it'd be like in that same analogy, instead of getting 100 data points, you get, tuned up on bourbon and double IPAs, and you're walking home and you can't even see 10 feet in front of you. Your 100 data points gets brought down to 25. So it's right. Like, it's very easy, I think, for people to come back and be like, no, that was more real than real, because you not only have the original 100 data points from your traditional 5 senses, but then all these other ways of taking it in. And, that's what you take back and you can't forget. You can't unsee, you can't unfeel, you can't be like, oh, like sympathy and empathy are real things. Like, oh, I can put out like an aura energy bubble. Oh, I can follow my gut and intuition, and then like, and however, so like even that, like following your gut, following your intuition, me saying that I can induce my own goosebumps, like whatever senses or however, like whatever I'm tapping into to allow those things, maybe we don't have the scientific terminology for them yet, but it's clearly a sense that I've heightened, that I know how to practice, and that I can tap into, and that I'm not special in having it. Everybody has it. It's just I've taken the time to lean into it. And, that's really the take-home message of all of this. Whether it's psychedelics that blast off the plaque, some people it's trauma, some people it's a loss, some people it's a coma. So, a near-death experience can snap somebody into having these types of experiences. Whatever it may be, lean into it. I guess part of my message is, don't wait for the traumatic event to happen to realize your inner light or beauty, or to explore yourself. We can all do it now. And that's why I'm really excited to talk to you, your younger generation. And even I just worked last night with a kid who's 18 years old. And I'm so excited. I really, really am excited for the future generations and the younger people that are growing up. Like, I think they're ready. We're ready. Like we're ready for a new way of living as humans. And it's not social media smut, mass media crap, just, alcohol and prescription pills, and it's having conversations like you're having to try to get to the bottom of what it is to be a human. And it's not banging ourselves, banging our heads against the wall and self-limiting ourselves and working against one another. It's doing this. And I don't know. I love being part of these conversations. I love listening, and now like became a huge fan of you and what you put out there. And I'm just excited to see where we all, all collectively bring our piece of the puzzle to not even figure it out. I guess that's the point, right? It's not connect the dots. It's just enjoy the process while we're here. And we don't have to be so wrapped up in hoarding resources and mental health issues and stuff like that. We can actually enjoy life and eat ice cream and drink coffee and make love and, all that good stuff.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you. What a perfect way to finish. I mean, this has been a great conversation. Really, really, it exceeded my expectations in a lot of different ways. As I said, this is definitely a different perspective on the topic than I usually take, but I think that's important for my own development of ideas and just the kind of platform that I want to build. And what I'm really trying to create here at the Giant Shoulder is varied perspectives and different point of views, and not just academic journal papers of sticking people in MRI machines, which I think is extremely limited, as I mentioned at the start. But Man, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your vulnerable experiences. I'm so happy to hear that you wake up today with a mission. It's awesome to hear. It really is. I've loved this conversation. You're a great communicator. It's so fascinating. We definitely disagree on a bunch of stuff, but that's good. That's great. I would love to dive into a few of these things more. I'm sure you'll come back on the podcast.
I'd love to,
You've made me, a few of my conversations have made me want to try DMT. Perhaps when I do for the first time, we'll come back on and talk about it and integrate that experience together. It's been such a pleasure, man. I look forward to our next conversation. Keep doing what you're doing and keep spreading the positive message. And I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity.
The Giant Shoulder mission is to explore radical ideas in biology, neuroscience, and consciousness, and elevate those stories to the highest possible level while keeping them accessible to everyone. If this interests you and you want to support independent science, then please consider subscribing to the Clips channel. Check out our 26 Neuroscience book. You can download it for free